Hi, this is Eric Durak, and welcome to this edition of Med Health Fit, the TV show that integrates wellness and healthcare. And tonight, I have a holistic health practitioner, Delaney Gabriel, on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness. I went on your website, and you've been involved in the practice of holistic health for 36 years.
I have.
So in terms of comparing you to other talented people in Santa Barbara, you may be, if not one of this community's, one of this country's leading longevity holistic health people, because you started in the mid-'80s, correct?
I did. Well, actually 82 was when I started, but I didn't consider myself a specialist or whatever until, a period of time after that, until I felt like I really had the credibility.
And back in the 1980s, how did one go through a credentialing process? Because now there's holistic health certifications, not everywhere, but you can find them fairly readily.
Right. My path was much different from that. So I started out in dietetics because I wanted to be a registered dietitian.
Okay.
And I had been trained by the Shaklee vitamin company back in the 60s. So my idea was to combine diet with supplements, because I felt like if sick people aren't going to get well just by changing their diet. And so I looked to supplements to implement for their healing process, and that went well. And then over time, I found out that as an RD, I couldn't even recommend any more than an orange. I couldn't recommend vitamin C at all for somebody, even with the cold or the flu. You couldn't do it.
Because they felt you were practicing medicine or something.
It was forbidden. So
yeah.
I was in class, I broke out in a rash, got up, left my books there, walked out the door, and that was the end of that. And I wondered why I had pursued that path for so long. But it was really just so that I would have that base of knowledge.
Right.
And then I studied naturopathy with Dr. Gary Gordon, who is a world-renowned physician at Preventa Medical Clinic in Sacramento.
Okay.
And sort of came in through the back door and just studied
probably
like
back
crazy.
then it was the front door, because there really wasn't a lot of that going on in the 80s.
Not much at all, but I was just very lucky. I mean, I worked with Julian Whitaker. And
he still is. Well, he's retired now, right?
Very retired. Poor thing. Yeah.
But back in 20 years
Bob
ago, 25
Atkins,
years,
yeah,
all those guys
I ran
were
with
the
big pack.
the big
Yeah.
names back then.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading about I got interested in sort of health literature. My father used to get Prevention magazine from the early 60s through the 80s. And when he moved, he said, I said, what are you going to do with all this stuff? He says, put them in boxes, they're yours. So one summer in college, I read 15, 20 years of prevention. And when you go start from the 60s and you read what Rodale talked about, from bone meal in the 30s to prevention of curing diabetes through diet and exercise in the 70s, why you shouldn't eat bread, all those types of really interesting things. And then I went to study public health, and I went to this public health program, and while I'm talking with one of the advisors, I said, by the way, I've got a library of prevention magazines from the 60s and 70s.
What a treasure.
And he goes, oh, we don't really read that stuff here. And I'm like, okay, so that just, but, I don't want to mention the school, but it's just that there was a mindset there that if you don't study medicine in the medical model with public health, et cetera, everything else is kind of not good. Well, you can look at Prevention magazine now and say they were spot on 40 years ago.
All that time.
And
I looked, when I was in school, even in dietetics, I looked at all the failures in medicine. And that's what drew me in, to say, I've got to do something more than is being done now.
Right.
And the RD thing's not going to fix it. And I assisted a dietitian at a hospital where in Central Oklahoma. And so it was my deal. I was going to take all the heart patients off of bacon and eggs, and they let me go. It didn't work out very well. The doctor had to call me and say, well, you're dear and you're sweet and stuff, but the patients are upset because you're changing their diets.
Right, but it's interesting here. We're sort of coming full circle to the Meadow diet and the other high fat, high protein diets, and it's like, well, now bacon and eggs is
Oh, I know.
Oh,
I know.
So we'll get into.
It depends on your blood type. I do a lot by blood type.
Okay, well, but so You also work, one of the unique things about how you practice what you do is you have an office in Santa Barbara, you have an office in Monterey, California. Carmel, California, and also in Sacramento.
That's right.
So you travel between these three cities on a regular, how does that work?
It works out really well because I just jump along the way. My husband is an architect. His main office is in Paso Robles, so I see him and I go see my daughter in Hillsboro by Burlingame.
Okay.
And then I go on up to Sacramento. Oh, I miss Carmel.
Right.
Anyway, so Paso Robles, Carmel, my daughter's house, Sacramento, and then the same way back. So it's a fun trip.
Oh, well, that's great. And then and I'm sure you're busy in all of those locations. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be there.
No, I wouldn't need to. And people love the telephone.
Right. Well, the thing is with Skype and
great.
and I just this year I jumped on WhatsApp, which is a really cool way to talk to people internationally and not have to pay $4 a minute or something.
Oh, wow.
So
that's good.
So that's fun. So my next question is, what makes your practice unique from other types of I'll say holistic health providers? And I'm trying to think of a couple folks in town who use things like movement and Tai Chi. People who are really focused on diet. Other people who are sort of stress reduction. What makes you a little bit different, other than you travel? You're this traveling health person. But is there anything that you do that you sort of like that's in your bucket of business that's a little bit different than you see maybe your other folks around here?
Well, the first word that pops into my mind is interrogation. I interrogate people to get enough information because typically people come in and they have aches and pains or they have symptoms or whatever and they want to focus on those.
Right.
That's not enough for me. So I do a really extensive health history. I also have people bring their blood tests in from their doctors, and so much is missing. Just too many blood tests are missing. Like we were talking a little bit before you started the show, that in men, I like more thorough testing than just the PSA test. And before any man takes testosterone, they should get the level tested and make sure and test their DHT, dihydrotestosterone, all these things. And also, we didn't talk about this, but I want to make sure you know and that other people know. It's really important for men to get their estrogen and their progesterone levels tested.
Right, and I actually do because I have what's called the Krakow Panel, and Dr. Kwakow's been on the show, and we've talked about that. And so he has a very specific one that looks at hormones, immune system, and something else.
Right.
That is quite a bit different than what you would get with a normal, a CBC or something like that.
Right,
so.
and mine typically is more thorough than his because we've, with some of the doctors and oncologists and I have in this area have had some discussions about the estrogen known as estrone, because I have dubbed estrone as being the #1 form of estrogen in cancer of different kinds. And a lot of doctors here were really resistant to ordering that for a long time, just like they were in Sacramento for 20 years. And they just said, just do it. Do what you want, because it's just, because estrone is the estrone, it's the one. The deal is that it should always be 1/2 of an estradiol in anybody. And as we age, especially in women, the ovary function becomes minimal and you don't make the estradiol that you need, yet the estrone increases because of adrenal stress. So a lot of the work that I do is to get the full picture of all the hormones, SHBG, all of that, IGF-1, and then put somebody on a program to address the excess estrogens and at the same time increase the good estrogen.
Right, so before the show you had said, well, it would not be prudent to increase a man's testosterone via prescription if you're not addressing the estrogen or progesterone hormones in balance with that.
Right,
correct?
and then you've got to make sure that the liver is functioning correctly. And in the good old days where I was thriving, there were lab tests like GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase. It's the liver enzyme that has to do with alcohol. And then there's a candida part where when you don't break down the carbohydrates well, then the body forms candida. Some people call it candida.
Right.
And then I remember once I had someone in Sacramento who went to Capital Christian Center, and she would come in and bring her Bible, and I'd pray with her and so forth. And I get her blood work back, and her GGT is sky high. I think it was like 76, and it should be 26. And I said to her, Jean, you're an alcoholic. And she got her Bible, and she was so feisty and upset with me because she'd never had a drop of alcohol in her life. But her liver enzyme was high, so then adding any kind of hormone on top of an already stressed liver, because the liver is like the home base.
Right, and so the liver
hormones.
says she's an alcoholic.
Liver
even though
says she is,
right.
but it's from bread.
Right.
But to the liver, it doesn't know the difference between
right.
alcohol from Wonder Bread Bakery and so forth.
Right.
So it's really that I look at those things very closely. And then I treat everything there concomitantly.
Right.
And sometimes in stages. But I would venture to say that there has never been a case with anyone where the only treatment they got from me was hormones. And I'm dead set against that.
Right.
I'm an all or nothing kind of practitioner. Because I think that's how it should be, and people need to be taught how to be responsible and to manage their diabetes and other things simultaneously. And hormones they're just so important, especially we were talking a little bit about the brain function.
Right, which I'm going to get into in a little bit here, because so we'll wait on that.
Ahead.
That's actually a couple.
Yeah.
So, but blood labs are really king now, and I just wrote
From
a manual a couple years ago called the Blood Lab Wellness Specialist, because I want personal trainers and health coaches and other people to know that because of today's technology, you can offer a blood test to your client online. LabCorp and some of these other ones, they're national lab things. And I said, you don't have to be an expert in bloods. You don't have to be like a doctor, but you should know basics, of cholesterol and, like you say, the hormones, the immune function, etc., based on your client. Like if you have a client with diabetes and you're following their glycosylated hemoglobin, gosh, it'd be nice to get it a few times a year.
Absolutely.
Without having their doctor be the referral source. Well, now a client can get it on their own with a number of these things. And some like I know LabCorp has you can get it for $40 or $50. So to get it 2 or 3 times a year now, and the trainer, without violating HIPAA laws or any of these kind of things, but if the client wants to show their trainer, hey, look at what we've done. Look at I lost 20 pounds, and look at my whole. It's a good thing, and I'm a data guy. I think that's a good thing. So the next thing I want to talk about is supplements, because it's part of your practice, which I find to be fantastic, because we also spoke before we went on air about how social media or the internet is trying to squash a lot of these health practices. And one of the first things that I used to read a few years ago was about supplements. And I read these articles about, are these supplements killing you? And I'm like, are you kidding me? And even dietitians are writing articles for these national publications about how bad supplements are. And I said, if you think supplements are bad, how about drugs?
I know.
So anyway, you like to prescribe supplements, but you don't have you're not a generic like everything else. From what I'm hearing, it's very specific to the person.
Absolutely. I probably have over 250 different supplements that I carry in my practice, and sometimes maybe there's only a person who needs 1 or 2 or 3 of those. And then I have private label supplements, and all of the supplements and the supplement companies that I work with, they're owned by private families and individuals. Unfortunately, some of the companies that I have dealt with for over 30 years have now been sold to Nestle, and I won't touch them anymore, and Pfizer. Brands like, I knew Ruben, who had Garden of Life, and that's been sold several times. And anymore Now Foods, those things, I won't touch those anymore.
So Pfizer has a nutraceutical division, right?
They do.
Yeah,
they do.
And I wouldn't trust it, because I don't think that Pfizer is at their core.
No, and I want that. I mean, it may not matter, because when you analyze, a tomato is tomato. But to me, a tomato is not a good tomato unless it's grown correctly and ripened on the vine. Because a lot of the problems that we have with digestion comes from eating unripened food. It's really green. It's not even fit we can't digest it.
You remind me of a book that I read a few years ago called Tomato Land.
Oh gosh,
You
I don't
remember
know
that
about
one?
that. No, I don't.
Anyway, it was this guy was an author, and he's in Florida, and he's at a stoplight behind his big truck, and it looks like there's tennis balls in there.
Oh.
And he's like, there are these green tennis balls, and one falls off, and it bounces, and he looks at it, he goes, that's not a tennis ball, it's a tomato.
I know.
And they're going to a factory where they're
Yes.
going to be injected and let ripen the bottom,
Yeah.
and whatever. And it was just, and so he got this bug, and he says, I want to write, I want to learn about this. And 3 years, he came out with this book on Tomato Land, which is one of these nutrition books that really is, again, the scathing indictment of the CAFO, the corporate structure now of food that I think is pretty much ruining everyone's digestion.
Oh, it is.
So.
And back to the vitamins. So as long as it has the chemical configuration, they feel like it's the same, but supplements are not created equal.
Right.
And just to get the purity and the quality and all those things, that's a must in my mind. So that's how I associate myself.
Well, with 200 brands or 200 types of supplements, we're not going to get into specifics. I have a question a little bit later on. But you also use bioidentical hormones. So explain to the audience, A, what a bioidentical hormone is, and maybe a brief description on how it would be used effectively.
Okay, so bioidentical simply means that it is biologically identical to the hormones that your body makes.
Okay.
So Premarin, Pravera, all those things were not bioidentical. They were just chemical, and that's why I think there was so much breast cancer and cancer of all kinds in those. So bioidentical hormone. But then again, it's about measuring those and seeing what the body needs. So sometimes I use a supplement called DIM, diindolylmethylene, because that breaks down the bad estrogen. Okay. And then, or I'll use DIM and curcumin if there's inflammation, I'll combine those. So it's about breaking those down, and then always, almost always, or nearly always, using progesterone, and the estrogens that I use, as is the progesterone, are all from the wild Mexican yam. I won't use anything soy-based. I'm pretty much against soy, and I know the vegans and vegetarians may not want to hear that, but baby, go get your estrone tested, and if it's fine, I'm fine.
Right.
But normally it's not.
But we've heard a lot about soy from the breast cancer field and all that, and so that makes it makes sense. I was never really a big, maybe a soybean once in a while, but not something in a diet day after day after day.
Right, exactly.
So one of the things we spoke about beforehand, we had a nice conversation before we went on air, was brain function, and there's so much research, there's so much interest. The recent movie about the concussions with, I get Will Smith or somebody, and now we're looking at Alzheimer's and brain function and all these things. Why is the brain doing this? And that's really a part of what you've been working on for a number of years. So
yes, always. Again, when I was working with Dr. Gordon and Julian Whitaker and Atkins and all that guys, we were doing chelation therapy, which ethylene diamine tetracyclic acid injected to the vein. But now I use something, it's called ACZ. It's a form of zeolite that's just a spray in the mouth. Okay. And so I measure the heavy metals up front, blood, urine, get those numbers, and then get somebody started on the ACZ, and I see those numbers go down. But, and not to be argumentative with you or anyone, but I think the main thing that's changed is the information, the awareness, the recognition. But I've been treating Alzheimer's before Alzheimer's and Parkinson's were even popular. They weren't even, household words at that time, back in the mid 80s and the late 80s. And a lot of the treatment was getting the heavy metals down.
Right. And a lot of people, I think from a societal standpoint, we're just now sort of saying, we've got these heavy metals in foods and pharmaceuticals and all this other kind of stuff. And now they're starting to say, well, my Uncle Frank has got, Alzheimer's or whatever, but he's only 69 or 70. Can we actually, cure him of this? And I think that
cure's a strong word.
We can help him recover better.
Right.
How about that?
And stop the progression.
Right, stop the progression.
Yeah, and that's where, again, hormones come in, because I've often said, you show me somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia, and I'll show you somebody with low estrogen levels, low estradiol levels, low progesterone levels, and typically low testosterone. So what I love doing in cases like that, when patients come in and they say, we've been everywhere, we've done everything, and we have all these lab tests, and we went to this clinic in San Diego, paid $25,000 and got this big workup. I'm like, where's this, and this?
Right.
and then looking at those things. But for dementia, for memory loss, for all of those things, just, fish oil is still really good. I'm not really big on krill oil yet. But there's other
Dr.
things.
Mercola would disagree with
I
you.
know he would. I know he would, and he would
that's
outmarket me for sure.
That's whatever. But,
yeah,
but like I say, I mean, at least you guys are still going down the same road. You may vary a little bit about omega-3s or whatever, but
we are.
But I think that for the most part, better one or the other than bologna sandwich and Pop-Tarts or something.
Oh,
so,
yes.
The typical American diet.
Oh, the typical. But there's so much that happens in the brain with testosterone, with estrogen. There's so much that happens if you can take a senior citizen or anybody and help them get a good night's sleep.
Right.
They're better the next day. They can really become more interested and come back to life and show up at family events. But there's just a lot that has to do with all this brain thing, with the hormones, even including serotonin, melatonin.
Right.
I love testing catecholamines and looking at dopamine levels. And I love GABA. One of my favorite products that I have in my private label is GABA and 5-HTP. And
all in terms of helping brain function to get better. Okay.
yeah, and mood. Yeah.
Because I'm not. I mean, GABA. I've heard of GABA, serotonin, et cetera, et cetera. But you probably have a list of 40 things that you might be able to, or 20 things that you might be able to look at specifically for brain function or whatever.
And the hardest thing is cutting it down to the number of supplements or pills that people can take in a day. So I have to work that out, and then we have to work out with the budget and all those things to refine it.
So I read on your website that you also work with people with colds and flu, which I would consider sort of basic types of disorders, and with all the issues that we have in medicine today with antibiotics and resistance and the whole opioids and the over-vaccination and all these kinds of things, you were actually promoting vitamin C and vitamin D, et cetera, as sort of primary aspects of this. So do you think that they work as well or better than some of these medications?
No.
You don't?
It depends. I mean, if you're healthy, you have a healthy diet, and you're not exposed to a lot of others with cold and flu, and you take a good amount long term, then you can help to build a strong resistance.
Right.
But when it comes to treatment and with all this horrible thing that's going on, that's when I get more into astragalus, some echinacea.
Right.
I have an herbal tincture called immune support. That's really good. But I also use a lot of colloidal silver.
Okay.
And the brand I like is ACS 200. It's the twin to the zeolite.
Okay.
And because I've found that getting people to take enough vitamin C, they generally have some kind of intestinal disruption that is difficult for them. And then vitamin D, because I do have an aging population for my clientele, because many of these people have been with me 20 and 30 years. So vitamin D, if it's not really broken down and it gets stored, can be an issue for the kidneys. So we have to just be mindful of all those things.
I mean, did they go out and get some sunshine? That's a really big. Here we live in Southern California.
And that doesn't work.
No? Sunshine?
No. It'll help synthesize some vitamin D on your skin. I remember this one young man was 18 years old, and he came to me because he just kept getting sick all the time. And I said, well, let's check your vitamin D. Checked his vitamin D. It was 18. He was a
normal level should be,
Eric. A healthy level would be between 65 and 80. Right. Is what I like, and depending on immune system and that sort of thing. But no, we can't. Sun just doesn't do it. If it did, we wouldn't have this epidemic of osteoporosis. And vitamin D is actually a hormone. It's calicociferol.
Right.
And you have to have good levels of vitamin D in order to have a good bone. And you have to have enough estradiol. Estradiol is like the gatekeeper in the bone. It keeps the bone from leaving too rapidly. But progesterone is the one that has osteoblasts on the bone that help to regenerate new bone. And then testosterone to make it strong.
Right.
And then the vitamin D for that.
So everything that I'm hearing and we have a few minutes left. I'm going to have my last question here, but everything that I hear you say always comes back to hormones. If the hormones are not in balance, that's where the big issues are.
It's a big issue.
Right.
It doesn't have to be just PMS or that sort of thing. It can be just, depression. I've just had so many cases of people with bipolar or autism, different things, and including Parkinson's, but they can, and it's not, I would never say it's solely a hormone issue, but I think that hormones are an integral part and a significant part, should be a part of the treatment.
Right, I would say with cold and flu, if you're exposed to something and your hormones are out of balance, the odds of you recovering in a timely fashion are not as good.
Right, and part of that's because you just get depressed and you feel hopeless and you give up. Yeah.
So, we spoke again before we went on air with this whole issue regarding social media and the suppression of health information that's not medicine. You're seeing a lot of the Facebook, all these algorithms, Wikipedia, that they're essentially trying to wipe out chiropractics and acupuncture and vitamins and all these kind of things from the social media world. And in some respects, I think they might be successful, but I also think too that the genie is out of the bottle here in terms of what people are really looking for. Because when my mother, who's 82 years old, is more interested in learning about vitamins and going to chiropractor, et cetera, because she knows that it has helped her, as opposed to some of the drugs that have she's taken over time. So she's trying to get rid of some of these things. So my question is, are you seeing, independent of the social media curfew, are you seeing a rise in the holistic health mindset with people and more of an interest in learning more about how holistic health can be of benefit to them?
I absolutely am, and part of it is because our generation, we've gone through it with our parents. We don't want to relive their lives. We don't want to go down those paths. And we look at the antibiotics and all the things that they've been on or others have, and we just don't want to go that direction. So I think that there would be a huge upcry.
Yeah, I agree with you, because like I say, I mean, now they're starting to get mad at the whole Facebook thing and all this other stuff, and they're going to be going to other sites. So we're coming into less than a minute here. How can people get a hold of you here in Santa Barbara? Because this is actually your newest practice, correct?
It is. My office is at Carrillo and State, and my telephone number is 805-969-3600. And then DelaneyGabriel.com is my website.
Right, which has been on the website right now.
And then I have a YouTube channel.
Fantastic.
Delaney Gabriel.
And Delaney Gabriel YouTube. So 30 minutes, boom, just went by.
It flies.
And I really appreciate you coming in. What a fascinating practice you have, and I'm glad that you're in Santa Barbara, because I'm hoping that we can use this to get you some more people. So this is Eric Durack for this edition of Med Health Fit. We appreciate you guys listening in. And Delaney, thanks for coming in and telling us about DelaneyGabriel.com and this wonderful practice you have.
Thank you.
All right, so this is Eric Durack from Med Health Fit. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.